You're going to see 5 techniques that I use in this painting. 1 is liquid mask, 2 is applying a wash, 3 is lifting, 4 is adding warmth to a metallic surface, and 5 is lettering. Now I say intermediate because I don't want to give off the wrong impression that just anyone starting out with watercolor can use these techniques to do what I'm doing. These all assume a basic proficiency with watercolor and some experience handling the brush and handling the paper. But even if you're just starting out, I encourage you to step out of your current comfort zone and try one of these techniques in your next painting. So in this painting, I used liquid mask to preserve the white of the paper over certain parts of the camera. Those are the parts that I wanted to keep shiny. And basically, remember, with watercolor, we want to use the paper itself to our advantage. The liquid mask will help us preserve the white of the paper, and when it's dry, after we painted over it, we can actually remove the liquid mask and we'll see the paper, and that will look like the brightest part in the scene. I taped up the paper so that I could have a clean white border all the way around at the end. And then I applied a green wash over the entire surface. This is because I wanted to have a consistent look with the other pieces in my exhibit. The exhibit was about machines that I've loved or observed, and I wanted to mimic a kind of lighting that you would get from fluorescent lights. Fluorescent lighting produces a green tint across the entire image, so I wanted to have that as part of my series of paintings. It just kind of harkened back to analog days for me. To achieve the green wash over the entire surface, I had to wet the entire paper, going from top to bottom. And my paper is inclined on my desk, which is how I like to paint. So I'm going from the top, the water is flowing downwards, and I'm going row by row and bringing the water down so it's covering the entire surface. And that helps with providing a large area of coverage with my paint. So after applying the green wash, I continued to use green to build up some of the areas in the camera body. And that's just because the green environment around it, I wanted the body of the camera to actually reflect it and to feel part of its environment. So it was natural to use the same green and to just build up some depth by applying additional layers of green over certain areas. And then I went ahead and started using a darker color like this Payne's gray to basically convey the black color of the body. I carefully outlined the barrel of the lens, and you can see the liquid mask is resisting the color. So later on, when the paint is dry, we can remove the liquid mask there, and it will reveal the white of the paper. And it will seem really shiny because, you know, there was a green wash over the entire surface after I put the liquid mask on. The liquid mask is sitting on top of the white paper. So here I'm still just building up the body, applying Payne's gray all over. It's a very light layer of Payne's gray. I'm using the lifting technique to remove some of the Payne's gray that I put down, which actually reveals the green layer underneath. And that's to help me preserve some of the areas that I want to be brighter in the scene. I don't want them to be brighter than the highest values, which is the white of the paper underneath the liquid mask. I just want some areas to stand out because we have high values, we have middle values, we have low values. So on the body of the camera, there's certain areas that not only are they slightly different color because of discoloration and use, wear and tear over time, but also because the direction of the light is not hitting all parts of the camera evenly. So some of the parts, like the area just to the left of the lens, there's going to be some shadow there, and there's going to be a slightly brighter area on the surface that is the battery cover that I've left a little lighter here. And again, that's using the technique of lifting, where basically you take your brush and you go over the surface usually the surface is still a little bit wet, or if it's dry, you want to wet your brush a little bit and go over it, and you can actually lift out some of that pigment, and that is a nice way of kind of peeling back some of the work that you've done to expose the area underneath, and that is a nice little hack for achieving a brighter value. I say this a lot to my students and in some of my other videos, but I love this stage where I'm able to add some dark colors to really bring out the contrast. Adding these dark values to the scene really starts to make some of the features pop, and it really adds depth. And I've said before that this is the stage that I really love. You can see here that I'm starting to add some burnt umber or brown tones to the body of the camera, and that's really to bring in some warmth. I don't want just a solidly Payne's gray camera because it will just feel like a cold piece of plastic or hardware. I want to show some signs of life here, and it's actually consistent with the way the camera body itself wears and tears. There's the front surface of the grip here. In certain light, it actually looks a bit brownish. There's a bit of yellow tint to it, and so I'm adding that because it not only is consistent with how it looks in real life, it actually started out brown, but because that's where the oils and sweat of your hand start to erode, there's actually some discoloration there in real life, and the brown actually helps to convey that. So there's a bit of wear and tear that I'm showing. I'm using the brown to bring some dimension to this otherwise monotonous surface. So there's not a lot of color inherently on this camera, so I tried to pinpoint the areas where I do want to add some color, where it actually makes sense. So on the grip itself, there's that color, there's the discoloration, and then there's also color in the lens itself. And the colors in the lens are coming from reflections from objects that are off screen. So that was another chance for me to introduce color into this otherwise dark object and add some interest in a way that is actually realistic. So here you can see me using my finger to remove the liquid mask, and it's like a rubber cement kind of texture, but basically you remove it and then it reveals the white of the paper underneath, and you can see that it really seems to shine because there was actually a green wash over most of the other area, and now we're revealing, even going beneath that layer, and we see the shiny parts really sticking out. So those are basically the brightest values in the scene. And that's a really fun stage to be at because the object really starts to feel three-dimensional. So once I've removed the liquid mask, there are some ways that I would touch up the areas immediately surrounding the white areas. Sometimes I use liquid mask to just cover a little bit more than what's necessary, and then once I've removed it, then I can finesse and polish up some of the edges and the areas immediately next to them. Sometimes you don't want just a big blob of white, but actually you want to really refine some of the edges around them. So you'll see me do that over the course of the rest of the painting. I know every generation complains about the next generation having lost something that we used to do. Well, shooting on film is definitely a lost art. There definitely was a thrill and an agony to it. It was an act of commitment to shoot on film. When you were handling a film camera, you had to be careful about loading the film in the dark because you didn't want to accidentally expose it. You need to be careful about removing it. You had to do that in the dark too. You had to think about aperture, shutter speed, you had to focus. You had to think about light metering and white balance and all these things. The Canon AE1 actually was the first camera that had a microprocessor in it, which actually automated some of these features. So it was an amazing advancement back then. But for me, it was still an opportunity for me to learn how to shoot manually and how to adjust shutter speed and aperture and focus. And it was a great learning experience, a great tool. And I still use some of that knowledge today when I'm using my iPhone camera or any other camera. All of the same nomenclature, the same terminology, the same functions, they all translate into the digital versions of those mechanics. So I'm so happy that I actually grew up using a film camera and a camera that allowed me to shoot manually. There was nothing instantly gratifying about it. Once you were done with the roll of film, which either had 24 or 36 exposures, you had to bring it to a store, a lab that could actually develop the film for you. And then you come back a few days or a week later to pick up your film, to pick up the pictures, the prints that they created. You get that envelope back from the store with your negatives and the prints. The negatives you had to be really careful with because you needed those to make any copies of prints later down the road. And then you flip through your prints and some of them were good and many of them would not be. And just that delayed gratification, that wait to see how your shoot turned out. You know, the roll of film could capture scenes from a long period of time. You might not finish a roll for weeks or months or even years, and to get that roll back with the pictures, it was like opening a gift because it was a time capsule. The other technique here is lettering. I put down white tape so that I could have some guidelines so that I could letter straight. And I use a very small round brush to paint the letters on individually. White gouache is an opaque water-based paint. So it allows us to actually paint on top of a dark layer of paint that you've put down. So white gouache is perfect for doing this type of fine lettering on top of a subject. It's great for doing signage on the street or even to do your signature on the painting. So I'm using white gouache now to polish up and finesse some of the fine details that I couldn't have used liquid mask to do, since liquid mask is more imperfect. You can't really get to these fine areas, and it's just more difficult to handle in terms of putting it on the paper in a very detailed manner. Also, I gave myself some room not to do the lettering exactly perfectly because the lettering was a little faded and discolored on the body itself, so it's okay if some of it smeared or it didn't look perfect. And actually, if you look at it in person close up, there's some imperfections there, so it's actually realistic to not have it completely clean and perfect. If you enjoyed this, like, share, subscribe to see more of my videos, and visit my website at art-francis.com to see more of my original art and for details about how to commission me for a custom artwork. Thanks.